back to another episode of Questions with Crocker with me, Dr. Crocker. And normally I have a co-host who is my husband, but today I am so excited to have my very first guest on the podcast. I have Dr. Cellini with me. You want to say hi?
Hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. So I've wanted to have guests for a while because this podcast is all about veterinary medicine, behind the scenes, just letting people know who we are, what we experience, and definitely have a lot of veterinary professionals, but also pet owners on here. So I put out there, what questions would you want to ask a veterinary neurologist, which is what you do. And I'm excited to jump into it. But first, I always talk to my husband a little bit about just life in general. So I know you're a golfer also. I see you post about it on social media. He is a social media personality, so we're going to try not to get canceled during this podcast today. But I want to know, how's your golf game? Like, can you hang? Do you like hit the ball from the back tees? Like, where are we at?
Not yet. I don't. I guess, yes, I can hang. I'm usually shooting in like the mid 90s, somewhere around there. And I take pride in the fact that I don't just take endless mulligans and breakfast balls and stuff like that. Like I purposely count everything, including like when you have to take drops and stuff, which my, let's just say my siblings don't always do when we play.
I was going to say we couldn't play together then.
Yeah, they have a much more relaxed sort of, but I want to know what my true handicap is. And I'm kind of obsessive when I see a number associated with me and I want it to go higher or lower, kind of how my brain works. But yeah, I can hang. I was in my youngest brother, the youngest Dr. Cellini. We had his bachelor party last week, and we were in Scottsdale for 5 days. We played golf every day with like 20 guys.
That's amazing.
So it was an amazing time, and I figured out a lot with my golf game at that point. So I feel good about it.
I feel like there's two types of golfers. You're either the type that I am, which is like, let me have a beverage, let me enjoy myself. I might not even play every hole. Like I'm just out there to hang out, to have a good time. Right. And then there's you. And that's the intense competitive. I got to get better each time. And I just kind of want to be there. So we could
so
hang.
You treat the golf course like a bar, basically.
It's a social event, much more than an actual sporting event for me.
I get like that when I'm around like a bunch of guys and we're all having fun, then that's fine. Yes, whatever. Yes. But if it's me or me and one other person, then I'm trying to get better. Like I don't want to continue shanking every 3 holes. I'd rather get better,
right?
And kind of focus on things. But if I reach like a plateau of something, like where I'm shooting maybe a 10 handicap or something like that, I'll probably be like, okay, now we're good.
Yeah.
I don't need to get down to scratch.
Okay. So it's not like you're trying to become a amateur golfer at some point in time. And
no, I think it's a little too late in life for me to take that up. I think I'm too far into this veterinary medicine career, as it turns out.
It's never too late. And I'm assuming that competitive nature lends itself to you becoming a veterinary neurologist, which one is maybe not something everyone is aware is out there. And 2 is not an easy road. So can you give me the Cliff Notes version of time frame and your process to becoming a board certified veterinary neurologist?
Yeah. So the time frame is starting with veterinary school, right? That's kind of like our base here. After vet school, most of the time it's going to take you 5 extra years of actual formal training years. And that's year 1 is rotating internship. Year 2 is a specialty internship, which I would say most people have to do these days, unless you're super smart, connected, lucky, accomplished, some combination of all those things, then you can skip that year. But for all intents and purposes, you're probably going to have to do a specialty internship year. And then you've got a residency for 3 years after that. And each year, or each phase of that, gets progressively harder. There's orders of magnitude leaps in how difficult it is on your physical, emotional, and financial life, basically. It might be better nowadays because I think there's been some turnaround in how these things are handled. But for me, it was, by each year was the most difficult year of my life in progressing order. And it was it's something I would never, ever do again. If somebody asked me,
no,
I'm glad I did,
right.
But I could never do it again. It would be impossible for me to do it again.
I remember I did an equine internship and I was paid $30,000. after 4 years of vet school. And that was a little humbling of an experience. So you definitely have to have like the end goal in mind if you're going to pursue that. And that has to be like what you really want to do. And I know you do surgery. So are you doing like brain surgery? Are you doing back surgery? Give people a rundown of kind of the general things that you do as a neurologist.
Yeah, I mean, most neurologists are going to be doing back surgeries for disc herniations. That's like 90% of the surgeries you would do. Some form of spine surgery, usually for disc herniations or like malformations of the spine, certain types, sometimes tumors, stuff like that. And then, brain surgeries encompass, I would say, probably like 5 to 10% of your surgical caseload. So it's not much, to be honest with you. And I probably encounter about one case a year where it's like a viable brain surgery opportunity and the owners want to do it and they have the finances to do it. And, you have to hit all these ands before you get there. But it's mostly spine surgery.
Okay.
I would say, yeah.
Do you prefer surgery over medicine? Because when I am in the ER, like I want to cut. That is what I love to do. I'd leave all the DKAs and all the medicine cases to someone else if I could.
So would I.
Yeah. I mean, like rocking out in surgery. Okay. What is your surgery music? Do you listen to music in surgery?
I do. So to answer your first question, I would prefer to do surgeries over medical cases most of the time. It does depend on like what the medicine is though. Like if it's a brand new epileptic with and they're not on any medication already, all right, sign me up. I can do this I can do 20 of these at a time. If it's a 14-year-old dog who's diabetic, Cushingoid, is on 3 seizure medications and just had maybe a seizure 3 times in a row, I'm going to be like, oh man, these are a little tough.
And that's
I'd rather be cut in the back.
That's unfortunately, that's probably more so what you see because a lot of general practitioners and even us in the ER, we see kind of the first time surgery or the first time seizure activity. You get the cases that are the refractory, not, responding to treatment. What else can we do? So that would be tricky for sure.
Yeah, you are correct. Although I'm a little bit different. Like I worked ER for 2 years in between when I started my residency and when I finished my last internship. And I really like neuro ERs. So where I work, I try to take ERs directly and see them like, boom, like right off the bat as much as I can.
I love that.
I kind of like stalk the whiteboard a bit and we'll just take things directly and as much as I can because I got scheduled stuff, on top of that. But I really like getting in there for the first time and seeing things and, being able to be like, hey, I'm the neurologist here. And they're like, oh, okay. We thought there was a 6-hour wait. And I'm like, no, I can actually fit you guys in. Yeah. It's a good service to give people, I think.
Yes. If you want to move to Dallas, Texas and do that at my ER, I would love it. I am not as much a fan of neurology just in the ER setting because a lot of times people, their dog is fine and then all of a sudden they're not, right? When they come in with something neurologic and it's such a dramatic difference in change. And so it's a lot of emotional support to kind of work pet owners through that. And then also the options for diagnostics and imaging and all that is a little trickier depending on what's going on. And a lot of that, I don't have the capability to do spinal taps, to do MRIs. So I can
teach you how to do a lumbar spinal tap pretty quickly.
You know what? I'm good. I have my area that I work in that I'm really comfortable in. And then I will send it to you. I will send it to other people. I'm good. Thank you, though. Okay. I appreciate that.
Sounds good. Yeah.
So this is Questions with Crocker because we have people submit questions that we answer and we talk about. And usually I have to say I'm not an expert. So everything I have is, take it with a grain of salt. It's my experience. However, I have an expert here today. So I'm really excited to ask you questions that are a little more in-depth and specific to veterinary neurology. So are you ready?
Right.
Are you good?
I think I'm ready.
Okay.
Are you ready, Dr. Crocker?
I'm ready. We're not getting into anything yet that's, controversial. Right. So
all right. I'll ask you again. Are you sure you want to do this?
I am sure. I think we're ready to push the boundaries a little bit and pull back the curtain. So we'll see what people
All right.
think. Okay. So at Dr. Karen wanted to know, do you like to reach for potassium bromide or do you like to reach for phenobarb? Do you have a preference? And just in general, I kind of wanted to know first time seizures, what do you reach for? What do you load them with if you want to start treatment?
Phenobarbital, pretty much always, unless there's like a specific reason not to medically, like, I don't know, liver problem or something. But I generally just follow. So the ACVIM released a consensus statement on seizure treatment and drug algorithms in 2016, I think. And it's free. You can just go to ACVIM or even Google search it and it'll come up. And it's like an 8-page little document. And it just pulled together all the research at that. I mean, it's 7 years old now, but I think it still applies. And it spits out basically that phenobarb is the best choice for first line therapy as far as like how much research backs it and the degree of side effects that it causes and the odds of causing those side effects relative to the other meds. So taken all together, that's, I use that. And in my experience would say that's the best one to use, by far. Bromide is great. Bromide is often like the solution that, is kind of lurking out there that dogs don't get on very often. And when you use it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we should have been on this the whole time. The problem is they get a lot more side effects, both what I call nuisance side effects and like serious side effects with bromide, especially when it's like bromide and pheno together, then things start to kind of synergize in the wrong way. But to answer your question, yes, phenobarb, because you can give it IV. You can give it as a giant bolus all at once. It gets all the way into their bloodstream and reaches a steady state really fast when you do that. And I've not seen dogs go, everybody's worried about like a barbiturate coma if you give a giant dose all at once. I've never seen a dog have to be on the ventilator or anything like that. Yes, they're sleepy and they're probably going to be, out of it for 20. Most of the time, they're just like, a little lethargic and kind of drunk, but that's it. And they're still functioning.
Yeah. Even when you start on oral phenobarb, I have to tell owners that, it's going to take a little while to acclimate. And my own dog had seizures. One of my dogs that is not with me anymore. And I started her on it. And I mean, she was not herself probably for a week and a half. Yeah. And then it's kind of like she got used to it. So that is something I'll let people know. Like they need this medication, but you're going to see A, B, and C. And then it's usually fine. We use a lot of Keppra IV in our ER, and it seems like our doctors kind of tend to lean that way, but I've always been a phenobarb girl myself, so I'm gonna give myself a gold star. No.
No, I mean, a lot of people use Keppra as a first line, which is fine. In my experience, it may work in a drug naive dog. What I feel like is dogs that have clustered that or had status, it doesn't do the trick. And it seems to have this like honeymoon period that wanes after about 6 months and it just doesn't do anything anymore. It is kind of like the impression I've gotten over the years. So it's fine. It's just, I think phenobarb works better. And I think most, especially like newer doctors, are just afraid to give a giant barbiturate dose like that. Yeah.
And it can have liver side effects. So usually, you'll check liver values beforehand and you'll check a couple other things. But I agree. I think it works well. And it's cheap for owners long term, and they can give it orally, twice a day. It's pretty straightforward. And I've heard there's pheno, like topicals that they've come out with, which we don't have to go down that road. But there's a lot of options and compounding options that they're working on for cats and whatnot. So it's definitely a good drug to keep in your stock. Okay.
Can I give you a little ER tidbit?
Yeah. Give me them all.
So it just popped into my head. So a lot of the times dogs and cats will have an elevated ALT after having a seizure just from the seizure. It's a transient hypoxic sort of injury. Don't let that dissuade you from giving phenobarbital as a frontline drug. That would be my first tip that popped into my head just now.
That's a great tip. That's a really helpful tip, because I do think, especially younger doctors, they see like a slight ALT increase, and I have to tell them that too. Like, we just had an anaphylactic reaction. We just had, a seizure. We just had some heat stroke. The liver's going to be angry, and that's normal. So love that. Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we talked about IVDD, which is when a dog has disc rupture and it puts pressure on the spinal cord and they can lose function and mobility or just be really painful in their backs, just like people can. So I had a ton of questions about IVDD because it's very common. At Don't Be Jelly of Daniele wanted to know, I know, it was great. What is the IVDD prognosis? Because the numbers are confusing. And I think it probably means for those dogs that are truly down dogs. And when you're talking about surgery versus medical management versus euthanasia, what should we be telling these owners?
It's actually, break it up into like a 4-quadrant sort of thing.
Okay.
On the top 2 squares, top 2 columns, you've got, do they have pain sensation or do they not? Because having nociception, or deep pain as we call it, is the single thing that determines their outcome the most. That's it. Okay. And then on the rows to the left, you've got getting surgery or not getting surgery. Okay. So if you have nociception, whether or not you have surgery, the odds are in your favor that you're going to get better and walk again within about let's call it a month. Okay. It's just that there was a slight improvement in those outcomes with surgery. Okay. And the odds are like, 85%, something like that, taken all together. Whereas with just time, rest, and medication, it can vary a little bit between 60% to 75%. But it's still like above 50, even if you're paralyzed. Mm-hmm. So long as you have nociception.
So as long as you have deep pain where you pinch the toe, they can feel you, they look at you. Yeah. Okay.
They could be paralyzed for 3 weeks. They could be paralyzed for 1 day. As a percentage, which doesn't really apply to an individual, but just taking the statistics, if they have nociception, they usually get better with or without surgery. Okay. It's just surgery makes it more often. And their recovery is faster and usually more complete. Like they're walking better, 6 weeks later. But, that's the biggest thing is whether or not they have deep pain. You could honestly ignore everything else. Okay. If you wanted to just focus on just, do they have nociception or not? That's the biggest thing. And there's some nuance, like if a dog has only pain but is walking fine, the prognosis is probably great either way. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to really consider surgery necessarily. And these are generalities, by the way. Right. Obviously, I'm not trying to, forecast every case that comes into the But that's really the biggest thing. Do they have nociception? Yes, their prognosis is really good with surgery, and it's still pretty good without surgery. But if they lose nociception, then it's a 50-50 with surgery. Okay. And without surgery, it's very, very low, I call it. Yeah. Some of those that don't recover actually will develop a reflexive walking called spinal walking within about 6 weeks or so, where it's like a wind-up toy and they're not voluntarily doing it, but their reflexes have just started doing this to their back legs, and they they will walk. So some papers will list that as a positive outcome still, because what does it matter if they're getting from point A to point B, right? But yeah, that's when they lose nociception, that's where the numbers really change dramatically. And a lot of people still think that you've got to, after 24 hours, that there's no point in doing anything if they've lost nociception. Mm-hmm. But there's studies that have now come out that show that that's probably not true. There really isn't a ticking clock.
Okay. That's good to know.
And because I've seen dogs who have lost nociception for, 3 hours and never walked again. And I've seen dogs that came in, they've been paralyzed for a week and they don't have deep pain, nociception, and they get better and they're walking at the 2-week recheck mark. So it's really, once you lose that deep pain nociception, it's almost just it's predetermined at that mm-hmm. point. It's either you're going to get better or you're not. And it doesn't matter when you intervene in the next few days is what it seems like. Okay. What my thought process though is they're there in front of you. You should get that done within the next 24 hours mm-hmm. just to, give them the best possible chance. But I don't tell people it's been 2 days, there's no point in doing this.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful because I do think we'll see dogs and they'll go home and then, they'll come back a day or two later and it's are we out of time? And so it's good to know that it's still an option. I have heard that if it's extreme cervical pain and even if they're not like even if they're still mobile, but it's extreme cervical pain, especially in certain breeds, they should have surgery. That those maybe have like a worse prognosis with cervical versus like lumbar, thoracolumbar, but I don't know if that is accurate or not.
Well, the prognosis you're talking about is like whether or not their pain goes away versus like when you're dealing with back issues, it's like am I paralyzed or not,
Right,
sort of thing.
right.
And there are some, there's I think a recent study that showed that if you medically manage dogs with severe neck pain, presumptively from a disc, they have a lot of relapses. They keep having like a month, they're fine after a few weeks, and then a month later, they're back to being, and it just is this relapsing thing.
Okay.
So, I totally agree. Like if I do MRIs on dogs with like severe neck pain and I see a whopping disc, but they're walking fine, those I generally recommend just doing surgery because I'm staring at a wad of disc that is lifting the spinal cord up and making it into a little pancake. I'm like that. We should take that out.
It's not going to go away. Yeah.
Yeah. Or it might over the course of like a year.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a real struggle for the dog.
And a pain. So, okay, this is a yes or no question, which I know that's probably not fair. But if I'm in the ER and I have a painful back dog and finances are limited, should I push to take x-rays or not?
I would say if the dog is chondrodystrophic, like a dachshund, and he has a sudden onset of back pain, then I would say there's really no point in taking x-rays.
Okay.
Because the likelihood of a disc herniation is so high that the percentage of the time that it's not a disc herniation is so low that you're not doing an x-ray to save money in the long run.
Right.
The expected value of that test is so low that it's just, it would have to cost $1 to make sense to do if you run the math, right?
Right.
And it doesn't. It costs like 10% of the MRI cost.
Yes.
Like x-rays are like $300.
Yeah. Actually, let's.
Jeez. Okay. So So if the dog is chondrodystrophic, so dachshund, beagle, anything with short legs, Frenchie, I would say there's no real reason to do it in that scenario. But if you've got a non-chondrodystrophic dog with back pain only and who's walking fine, you can make an argument to do it to look for discospondylitis and cancer.
Okay. That's
would be the main thing.
Yeah.
The case I'm thinking of is an Italian greyhound who I saw for severe back pain, but was walking fine and had no deficits, no weakness, no ataxia, nothing. And I remember a CE from 10 years ago of Natasha Olby at NC State saying this exact clinical scenario. She said this exact thing. I took an x-ray and dog's got Aspergillus disco. Eventually we diagnosed it, and he's got like 3 different spots on his back that are all eroded.
That's insane.
So that scenario, I think x-rays are fine. But the down dachshund, the classic down dachshund. I mean, do you remember a time where an x-ray has changed the plan in the down dachshund?
No, absolutely not.
I've never seen it either.
I've seen like a spinal tumor or like infection in other breeds, but I have not ever seen it in those typical breeds. And genetically, like those dogs are prone to IVDD. So it makes sense that is the top of the chain. I actually heard, and I'm sure you know this because you're way smarter than me, but that the reason that they look
That's not true. Go ahead.
The reason they look the way they look, that those genetics are also linked with IVDD. So it's like a ridiculous percentage of them, but you can actually do genetic testing to see if they carry the marker for IVDD, which is something really interesting to me. And if I had a dachshund, I would probably look into that to see if because it's like 75% or something ridiculous that they're.
A dachshund is going to be over. I mean, it's basically ubiquitous in a dachshund. Just the way I tell people. Now you're getting me into another soapbox.
That's okay.
I tell people that the way you make a dachshund, let's say, is you are making a dwarf dog. Mm-hmm. You're making an animal with dwarfism. That is what they have, chondrodystrophy. Okay, so you can't arrive at a dachshund without having those genetics. Mm-hmm. Pretty much. I mean, 9.8 times out of 10, right? So it's really a matter of like looking at the shape of the dog. If they are shaped that way with short legs, their backs aren't actually longer, by the way. It's just the legs that are shorter.
Oh, interesting.
But if their legs are short in that kind of dachshund looking Shih Tzu, Beagle, Frenchie shape, then you've got a dog that's shaped that way and it got there most likely in 2023 by having chondrodystrophy. And so you then know that if he's presenting with a spinal issue all of a sudden, 9.9 times out of 10, it's herniated
It's a
disc.
herniated disc.
Right?
I like that. I like that. So, okay, this is another question, and I have this question too, but I had 3 people ask it. So we'll just say, at Red Save 17 wants to know, when would you use prednisone versus an NSAID for like IVDD or back pain? And I'm just going to put this out there. I had someone tell me forever ago, because I used to be scared of putting them on pred if I was going to send them to surgery or send them to neurology. And I had someone tell me it is one of the most painful things these dogs can experience, and that they were okay with me putting them on pred prior to sending them because they felt like they got better pain relief than with an NSAID, like an ibuprofen, for us versus like something much stronger. I would say still.
Is that true?
I would, what?
Is prednisone a better pain, better analgesic than NSAIDs with a back issue in dogs?
This is what I had someone who did back surgery do, and it was the person I referred to. So I think like whoever you refer your backs to, you should probably check with them. But if I was referring to you, do you have a big preference? Are you like, I can't do surgery if they're on pred? Do you care one way or the other if they're on one?
No. I use the drug that they come in on already, which is like either an NSAID or pred. So I have to keep using it. My preference is, again, if we're in this clinical scenario where a disc herniation is by far the most likely thing, I would use an NSAID. And the reason is the group at A&M, Dr. Evans and I forget the other neurologist there because I'm on the spot. But the A&M group published a paper like some number of years ago that showed that steroids give way to much more systemic side effects, and especially GI side effects. Mm-hmm. And they don't offer any advantage over NSAIDs in regards to like outcomes in any way. So I tend to, I use NSAIDs for like basically everything other than like, when I need immunosuppression or something like that, or like tumors and stuff. But for disc surgeries and wobbler surgeries, I'm just pure NSAID.
Okay. That's good to know. I had heard that forever ago. And for me, some of them that need to be medically managed, like I'll try an NSAID and like GABA and laser therapy and other things. And if I don't feel like it's working, sometimes I will try pred instead, and maybe I'll see an improvement. So I think it's good to know like what all your options are. But
the saying.
What?
Nothing should. You might have to edit this out, Harrison. Nothing should be dead without seeing pred.
Yeah, 100%. Valid. It's accurate.
Harrison, you can decide, and you, Dr. Crocker, you can decide too.
Oh, we definitely need to leave that in there, 100%. Okay. Yeah. So since we're talking about IVDD and we are talking about, oral pain management, we're talking about things like cold laser therapy, other modalities for pain. We're going to talk about one that is controversial. So I had at Doc Shiloh DVM who wants to know, why do you not recommend chiropractic treatment for IVDD in dogs or cats or any pet in general? And so I'm going to give you like a minute or two, like don't get us canceled, but let's talk a little bit about animal chiropractic care in veterinary medicine.
Well, to answer the question specifically, show me a shred of evidence that chiropractic helps with a disc herniation in dogs, first of all. Second of all, and by the way, the answer is there's none. Any in animals. Now, I personally don't really believe in chiropractic for people, but by no means am I out here putting out a professional opinion about human problems with chiropractic. So separate everything human chiropractic from animal here. I'm only talking about animals, right? The reason I don't recommend it is you've got the problem is that a disc herniates out and its central contents spew out and actively compress the spinal cord. There's a physical compression. And that's why we do surgery in the first place. It's why we call it a decompressive surgery, because that's what we do. When we do it, we remove the compressive part of that. Now, there is no possible way that you can just press on a dog's back and somehow relieve all of the material that's built up under the spinal cord pushing on the spinal cord. Like, there's no way to do that. And as you have seen with social media chiropractors, you cause significant pain when you do that to dogs who have a disc herniation.
Yeah.
And then you get into a situation, well, if you're inciting a painful stimulus over and over again with these adjustments, which, by the way, don't adjust anything. There's no reason to believe or evidence that they actually adjust the spine. You are then creating more and more painful stimuli, and you run the risk of running into what we call a wind-up pain scenario, where you're just triggering pain, and then dogs start to anticipate that they're going to hurt by being touched or approached. And that itself takes a longer time to kind of unwind. And so I think it's very possible. Again, there's no evidence that's looked at this either way, but using the physiological kind of rules here, I think it's very possible that we are creating worsening pain that takes longer to get better. We run the risk of making them worse because if we are manipulating a faulty disc that has a tear in the top of it, who's to say more of that disc isn't going to spew out when you're doing this? You're stressing out the animals. You're transporting them to a chiropractic facility back and forth, and they're not being crate rested during this time. When it's very important to do that in the first couple of weeks. And like I said, there is no indication that it helps with anything related to a disc herniation in dogs. So for all these reasons, no, I do not recommend chiropractic.
I mean, I thought you might just say like they're quacks. So I'm proud of you. That was a very technical reasoning, and it makes sense. Well, it makes sense because I tell people. I don't want to reduce it to like ad hominems per se, right? But I think that what this is, chiropractic in animals, it's wishful thinking combined with a lack of understanding of placebo. And then the owners of these animals are not educated enough by the chiropractor or their vet, by the way. Now, I'm not saying that they're not educated people, to make a decision whether or not to do this. That's I think the real problem here. Yeah, and I would say that we are familiar in veterinary medicine with people taking their experiences and then transferring them to their pets. And so anyone that has had chiropractic work or has had something done to them and they found relief, a lot of times they have the best intention as pet owners to say, I really just want to help my pet. I see him in pain. I see them hurting. So I really don't blame them because I agree with you. We are not educating them enough, and the chiropractors are doing a better job, honestly, of marketing what they have to offer. And so I want to take opportunities like this to talk about it and talk about how it could cause more harm and more stress and anxiety on your pets. And that
I think it's a real problem. Like I'm not just like putting out all this content just to like be a basement troll against what I don't like. Like I really do think this is a problem. You can go on the University of Illinois Veterinary School website, and on there, under the animal, at least the last time I checked, which is probably about 2 months ago, but on there you can find where it describes animal chiropractic and the benefits of veterinary or animal chiropractic, whatever the words they say. And they list that it can help with conditions like disc herniations and degenerative myelopathy or DM. And that's a real problem because we have and I'm not trying to call them out, but at the end of the day, they have a statement on their website that lists chiropractic that can help with an untreatable condition in DM, degenerative myelopathy.
Right.
It's not exactly the same, but it shares some similarities to ALS in people. Okay. So this is a untreatable progressive condition that dogs get. We don't have to get into the actual specifics of it, but the point is this modality is starting to really kind of infect veterinary medicine, and I think it really got potential to cause harm. And you mentioned like the human corollary. People talk about, well, it helped me or it helped my friend or family member. Why won't it help my dogs? Well, the simple reason is dogs have entirely different pathophysiology for a lot of their diseases that you or your friend or acquaintance had. And then oftentimes, I would say the vast majority of the times, these dogs don't even have a diagnosis of any kind. So what are we even treating?
Right.
And what symptom is even getting better here? Like, are we just doing this to do it to feel better about ourselves? So there's more reasons for you.
No, I think that's great. And it's happening in the human world too. I mean, people are being taken advantage of through things they see on social media and marketing in that way. So that's why people like you and I that are veterinarians and have knowledge and evidence-based medicine are out there, and we're talking about these things and we're sharing them on as many platforms as we can. And I know that, on YouTube, you have a lot of amazing videos that educate pet owners and are really straightforward. And I honestly find you hilarious. So
amazing to some, not to others.
Well, anytime you're talking about controversial things, you're going to obviously have the good and the bad that comes with that. But I think you seem like you have a thick skin, as do I. So what I also want to know is, first, thank you for all that amazing knowledge. But do you feel a little vindicated that the Guinness Book of World Records is now looking into whether Bobi is truly the oldest dog or not? Or
I knew you were going to ask me about this.
So
this is like Soapbox number 2
for
me.
Yeah. Actually, I think we might be on 3 or 4 at this point, but that's okay.
Yeah, probably.
So let's do a little backstory here. So Bobi is labeled the oldest dog in the world by the Guinness Book of World Records. You have a great video on YouTube about how that happened, what they're saying, all the evidence. And basically at the end of it, you say, false, like not true. And you lay out your argument. And this fired people up. Like they were angry that some dog they had never met that was stated to be the oldest dog in the world, that you were saying it wasn't true and it wasn't factual. Right. And now Guinness is saying they're going to research it because people have concerns about it. So tell me about why that was so kind of important for you to talk about and how you're feeling at this point in the whole thing.
Yeah. So I, like many vets, I'm sure, first read the story and I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah.
Like that was, I was like, come on. And I was expecting to like get into the details of it, because once that's triggered in me, I'm like, all right, now I gotta
know. Yeah.
I gotta neglect my children for 5 minutes and look at, what's going on here on my phone. Start scrolling. My baby's crying on the ground, and I'm just scrolling on my phone.
Dad of the year right there.
Right. Father of the year right here. So I looked into it and a couple of things jumped out at me. One is that Guinness's article is just like, there's no source or any, they're just like saying it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, well, we're talking about like a claim equal to a person saying they're 200 years old, mm-hmm. pretty much, right? So I'm not going to take this at face value. So I looked into it more. And when I Google searched it, Karen Becker and her, social media profiles and accounts were instantly the thing that came up. Mm-hmm. And I saw that she's like at his birthday party and they're getting a photo op with Guinness Book and there's all these journalists there. And I'm like, wait, like everybody that's getting a photo with him stands to have their business supported by this dog's life being 31 years long because of what they highlighted, which was like his diet being natural and this sort of naturalistic sort of, approach to dogs' diet and whatnot, which I don't necessarily agree with. But the thing that struck me was just like, this is a little too convenient. Like, you mean to tell me a veterinarian that their entire platform on social media revolves around like, she published a book called The Forever Dog, mm-hmm. and how to make dogs live as long as possible. Mm-hmm. And she just shows up, so that got me kind of suspicious. And when I dug into it, the first thing I noticed was that Guinness Book actually, it's not like the book when you and I were kids, mm-hmm. that where it was just like people were like submitting records and that's like, oh yeah, they actually did this, and it was really objectifiable stuff. Like, we watched this guy filmed some dude eat 100 hamburgers in 10 minutes, right, or something like that. Right?
Walk across Legos for so long, like, and
or like we made the world's largest pizza and we had a tape measure out. And we measured the freaking pizza, right? So it's simple stuff like that. I loved reading the book when I was a kid, but apparently, and NPR had this, a podcast about this a few years ago. They've gone to this like pay to play model over the last 5 or so years, where you literally pay them money to promote something surrounding a record that you invent. And that's why the records have gotten kind of like out there. And it's like, what is this? You know?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I was like, man, so we're supposed to just kind of buy all this. And, and I'm just not the type of person that's going to just let this like sit in my brain. I got to like at least state my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
So
no,
I dug into
no way.
Yeah, right. So I dug into that. And one thing I noticed was that, Dr. Becker in her Facebook page, she said, well, they did telomere length testing to confirm his age. And I'm like, that's not a thing.
Mm-mm.
So I emailed some of the department heads at like UC Davis about like genetics research and telomere research in dogs. And they pointed me to some research articles that I showed in the video. And turns out there's no genetic test you can do that just spits out a number that's a dog's age. Like that's not a thing. Okay. So that's total BS. And then I emailed the Portuguese authority that supposedly verified Bobi's age. I said, hey, I'm a vet in the U.S. I'm just wondering, like, how was this done? How did you verify? And this is the same organization that Guinness reported, literally word for it. This organ, it's called SIAC, verified his age. So I emailed them, and they said, the owner just self-reported his age. Just walks up and just says he's 31. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so this, I'm just to clarify, I'm like, this is Bobi we're talking about, like, just to make sure that you know who I'm talking about. They're like, yeah, we do no verification of ages or anything like that. Now, from what I understand, there's prior organizations that did,
mm-hmm.
but like, where is that? Like, is that just a piece of paper from 1992 that says like the word Bobi on it? And then how do we know this dog is that dog that was given a rabies vaccine in 1992? And then, oh, by the way,
yeah,
the family, and you might have to edit this out too, Harrison, the family just, like many people back then, I'm not saying the family was like uniquely cruel, but apparently you just buried puppies if you didn't want them.
Mm-hmm.
You just buried puppies alive. But Bobi survived because he was brown and he blended in with the wood. So I'm supposed to believe that a guy is just burying puppies that he doesn't want. But then one escapes his being buried alive, and he's okay with it. And he's like, oh, yeah, we'll keep this one. Like,
yeah.
Is this a Disney movie? Like, what are we talking about? So all of this together, I was just like, I've got to get this out of my system and make a video about it. And what Harrison edited out was actually the previous record holder dog, which I mentioned in the first cut, was, I think, a 29-year-old Chihuahua, who was like the previous oldest, 20-something.
And that's more believable that a Chihuahua would be 29.
Well, until you read the actual announcement article, and they just found the dog in a grocery store parking lot, and they said he was 10 years old at the time that we found him, and that was 12 years ago.
Okay.
I'm like, what? Like, was there a microchip or something that somebody verified? There's no mention of that. And, I'm not saying it's impossible, but
right.
Are we just literally just, he's 10, and then 12 years later, no, he's died at the age of 22, So, and then the other thing that I don't know if I put this in the original draft or not, is that the record's been broken like quick, like the last year. There's all these dogs that suddenly pop up that they're like super old,
mm-hmm.
and they keep like breaking each other's records. And again, none of the articles mention any sort of verification of any kind. So anyway, watch the video, but for all those reasons, I think it's very unlikely. And to answer your original question, I wouldn't say I feel vindicated per se. I'm not like, I'm not on a mission to like disprove Bobi's worth. I'm not trying to like make it seem like he's not a great dog. He seems like a one of those like derpy mixed breed dogs that's just happy to be here
mm-hmm.
all the time. He seems like a very loving dog who's just like, hey guys, and just like, and those dogs are great. And I'm sure like the love he gave his family and vice versa was tremendous over his lifespan. So I'm not, and I said this in the video, like I'm in no way hating on him or like the companionship he provides in all that. Like not at all. What I'm questioning is all of the circumstances that surrounded his life that he's completely oblivious to.
Well, and by the way, and the capitalization of it.
Yes.
Right. So like that's the part for me that I think is important. I posted about raw diets the other day, and someone said, well, Dr. Becker says this, and, vets get paid by the companies to say what you say. Yeah. And I said, do you really think that Dr. Becker does not monetize at all off of
Right.
her consulting for these companies, her supplements that she recommends, her foods that she recommends. Like, I don't understand why people don't think that one of the most popular people on social media that's a veterinarian and talks about holistic ways of life and different things and really speaks to like controversial subjects in a way that people, you know, are really going to cling to, doesn't monetize off of that. She 100% makes money off of her stance and her views. And she makes a lot of money because I have been offered by some of those companies to also go on social media and say, hey, if you give your dog this supplement, they'll be able to walk again, even if they have IVDD. And I'm talking money like $10,000, $20,000, like a lot of money. And
damn, I got to get my Instagram followers up.
And guess what? I don't do it. And I don't do it because there's not the, you know, research out there that says that these things truly do what they do. So to me, it just blows my mind that people think that the people that speak to holistic things in veterinary medicine don't somehow make money off of it. My favorite is people who say, don't over vaccinate. You should buy my titer test instead and titer your dog. And I'm like, so you're not making money off your titer test that you're recommending, which we're probably going to have people come after us and get canceled on this. I feel better that we're like in this together. But that would be my reason for speaking out about these things and talking about them and putting them out on social media is show me the data. Don't show me some dog in another country that they say is this age. And, you know, you think now is that age because of what you recommend. Like, show me what's real. So I love what you're doing and I am in full support. And even if
I don't hate Bobi. I think Bobi's
we love Bobi. We love animals.
He's like a great dog. It's just, you know, we've got, let's connect the dots. We've got a pay to play world record model. Okay. We've got a lifestyle nutritionist sort of veterinary influencer.
Right?
Yeah. And suddenly, like, first of all, how do we even know this dog existed? Like, who contacted Guinness to let them know that he's 31? So we've got like some opportunities here and like some incentives between some groups here that, you know, again, I'm not trying to be conspiratorial, but like, I'm just putting it out there. Like something to kind of think about.
We're just trying to make people think, and we're just trying to educate pet owners in our very straightforward way. One more question for you. So at CSH4456 wanted to know what would be your ultimate advice for aspiring neurologists, neurosurgeons, and I have to say now, social media veterinary influencers.
Yeah. My advice for like if somebody is like before the level of vet school, I'm assuming.
Or in vet school and they're considering it.
I would say don't take for granted your opportunity in vet school. I got really complacent. I had a really hard time in undergrad. I went to Georgia Tech for undergrad and I was stuck doing like all these like, you know, calculus and computer science courses that like completely drained me. And I went straight into veterinary school and I was just burned out. So I would say if you're an aspiring specialist of any kind, the thing that's going to get you access to the internships and residencies that you need is to have, first of all, like the gateway is like having a GPA that's really good straight out of vet school. I don't know, do they do GPAs anymore? Is that still a thing? You got to have that because if you have a low GPA, nobody's going to talk to you about an internship pretty much. The ones you get are just not going to have the level of access to a residency that you need because the residencies are at like, I don't know, 25 places across the country or something like that. And so you've got I could be wrong, but it's somewhere in the order of like a couple dozen. And you're going to have to like compete with people who have like straight A's, you know, top of my class. I published the paper in vet school. And by the way, I get drinks and cocktails with the residents and the faculty members all the time.
Yeah. I've heard who you know really matters for residency sometimes.
It absolutely does. And that's why I was able to become a neurologist because I knew somebody who started a residency program and I happened to live near him and he needed somebody. And so I started working for him and I got super lucky. But I'm an extreme outlier in that regard. And so I would say, it's I'm not breaking any news when I say that, but like you've got to just like treat vet school like a job
Mm-hmm.
that you want to excel at. And then you've got to spend all the time you can with neurologists during your clinical year. Take all your elective courses and make them neuro rotations. You've got to help out the technicians and not think that you're above helping the technicians, because that's like the number one thing that gets people kind of like iffy thinking about you, is if you think you're better than that right away.
And I would say that's the case with any specialty or great job in vet med. Like, be a team player, help out.
Yeah. I made it a point when I was interviewing to, if I saw poop in the kennels, I would just go clean it up just during my residency interviews. So I was like, well, I got to show them I'm like, I got some positives here, so.
You're like, I can handle the poop.
I'm not above this.
Yeah.
Just in case you're wondering. But, and then, if you placed to your internship and your residency, you just got to buckle up and just kind of just take it on the chin for a few years, because even though like the pay is better now and maybe the quality of life is better now, you're going to be just like broken down for a number of factors for a few years. And you got to accept that fact. And I think it's important to try to get that done in your late 20s, early 30s, because the older you get, the harder that's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I squeaked it out. Like I finished when I was 32. So I was like, but as you get up there in age and you start, because you're going to be working in vet med the whole time as you age too. And so you're going to start experiencing vet med burnout. And if you're trying to be like 38, 40, 42, something like that, when you're finishing, I don't know, it's going to be hard to like not be burned out by that point, and then you've just put yourself financially behind the 8 ball for so long that you then don't want to work to make it financially worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to be, lagging behind for that reason too, a lot of the time. I don't want to speak for anybody.
So if I kind of boil down everything you said, you need to,
please do.
No, you need to know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And you need to work with people that are doing what you think you want to do. So you get experience, you network, and they can help you in the future.
Right.
And you need to know it's going to be hard emotionally, physically, financially. So
it's going to be the hardest time of your life.
It better be the one thing you want to do. It better be. I'm
telling you, it makes vet school look like kindergarten. I'm not joking.
No, I believe you. Yeah.
Ask any neuro resident who's gone through it. I'm just speaking for neuro here. I'm sure it's similar across everything, but vet school, when I look back on it, vet school is like kiddie playtime compared to like the crap you have to go through all these years. And I would also add too, this is I think something that nobody talks about, which is that when you sign these contracts as a resident or an intern, nowadays there's people and organizations that are sponsoring your residency, which is a huge conflict of interest problem that I think shouldn't happen, but that's a different conversation. But just please read your contract, because oftentimes when you're done with residency, you will have to go work where they tell you to work within their network of hospitals for an equal amount of time to your residency. Or if you don't do that, you owe them like $300,000.
Yeah.
So just know that during your residency, they are training you and they are running up a tab against you, according to the language of these contracts.
Right.
And so if you have like a corporate sponsored residency, I won't say specific names, just know that you're going to have to work at one of their hospitals, and they're going to tell you where to work a lot of the time. And if you don't, well, on top of your student loan, you now owe this company $300,000. And if you want to fight it, you got to pay a lawyer $100,000 to get it done.
Well, and you probably can't work in the state because of a no compete.
That too.
So that,
and if your state is like California, have fun.
Yeah. So you're in trouble there. I think all that is really great information. And I think in general, you give good information, whether it's talking about things that, pet owners need to know or things that we need to know in the veterinary profession. And I'm glad we finally got to talk in person and not just over social media. So if people want to follow you, they want to know more, they want to see more of your videos or reach out with more questions, where's the best place to do that?
DVM Cellini is my name for everything. It's my TikTok, my Instagram, YouTube. I think that's all. Oh, Twitter. Yeah, I do Twitter too.
Oh,
I just randomly tweet late at night if I'm thinking about something. I'm just like
spiraling.
Oh. Yeah. Put this out there. It's all DVM Cellini, DVM CELLINI.
I like it.
Everything. Yeah.
So he's definitely worth a follow. And if you are interested in veterinary neurology, reach out, ask questions. And this podcast is a new type of segment in the Questions with Crocker series. So if you guys have anybody else that you want me to have on as a guest, that you want me to interview, or you have specific questions, make sure to follow us on social media, listen, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And that's it. Thanks, Dr. Cellini, for being here. And you guys have a great day.